info session. So hopefully we learned a lot from the first one. So you're probably going to get a lot of information just based on everything that happened a couple weeks ago. Joining me on this call today is Jessica B., Vice President from Red Resources, and Alexia Diamond, account executive with Red Resources as well. Red Resources is the communications and PR firm that's supporting Healing Illinois. They're supporting me today with all the tech and backend stuff. So you have any questions, feel free to connect with them. It's either Healing Illinois Tech 1 or Healing Illinois Tech 2. So just please, use for now, we have the chat. You can, type in not your questions, but comments, good morning, and that kind of stuff. But, we will disable it and then eventually use the Q&A function for to ask any questions, just because there's a lot of us in the room. So we want to make sure that we're able to get through all the questions and that we don't miss anyone. So that's why. So you'll see that in a little bit. Just a couple of reminders, please. There's a lot of us on the call, so just mute. If you can just make sure you put yourself on mute, we would appreciate it. We wanted to provide the space to be able to answer any questions that you have about Healing Illinois. A lot of today, we will be spending the time going through the RFP and then answering, again, any questions that you might have about the process, about the application. So we will get through all of that. Let's see. So the agenda, we're about Healing Illinois. I'm going to go over the funding priorities, the evaluation criteria. We're going to talk about intermediaries, eligibility, grant terms, application process, the application summary, and then, we'll open it up for Q&A. So just a little bit about Healing Illinois. So Healing Illinois is a racial healing initiative of the Illinois Department of Human Services. It is in partnership with the Field Foundation of Illinois. The Field Foundation applied for the RFP to be able to distribute 4.5 million in grants to organizations throughout the state. If I had to take a step back and just share just very quickly about, why Healing Illinois. About 3 years ago, this was post George Floyd murder. This was during what many called like the uprisings in the summer. About 3 years ago, during the pandemic, Governor Pritzker at the time wanted to do something, right? A lot of calls. I'm so sorry, Kristen. If you can please just make sure you're on mute. Oh, let me see. I can't mute you. Just please make sure you're on mute. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So if I had to take a step back to just share a little bit of information about why Healing Illinois, Governor Pritzker wanted to put some resources forth so that the state, we can figure out how people can come together, heal together, have conversations. It was a way for the state to respond to the calls for racial justice and racial equity. And that's how Healing Illinois was born. This was 3 years ago. It was during the pandemic, so everything was very much virtual. We really didn't, now that I think about it, we had no in-person activities. We're trying to do some of that this year, but sometimes because of the magnitude of it, because of the sheer number of people that are interested in Healing Illinois, we're doing these info sessions virtually just to accommodate everyone and everyone's schedule. So hopefully that's just a very, very quick, brief elevator speech about why Healing Illinois. Now, fast forward to, now to 2023 and this renewed commitment from the state. Healing Illinois, the goals still remain to build the foundation for long-term racial healing and anti-racism in Illinois. We know that that's not going to happen in one funding cycle. We sure knew that that was not going to happen 3 years ago over a year or two of funding. And it's probably not going to be the case either now. But what we do know is that we can begin to build create the conditions, right, and begin to build the steps towards that healing. But we know that that type of work takes time. The intended outcomes of Healing Illinois are to build knowledge and understanding, strengthen trust and relationship building among residents, and increase awareness and media engagement focused on racial healing and equity. Sometimes this thing just does not want to move to the next slide. There we go. Now the funding priorities of Healing Illinois. There's four funding priorities. The first one is what we call racial healing sustainability. So these are really activities designed to build community through knowledge sharing, building deeper interpersonal relationships, intentional spaces for collective healing. So this funding priority is really designed to a lot of the activities that lead to understanding and building empathy. Like, how do we understand each other as humans? How do we connect with each other? That's really what that funding priority is meant to do. The activities, I'll give you an example in the next slide or so about what are some of the activities that fall under that funding priority. But we also do encourage you to get creative. Think about how your existing programming or some of the ideas that you have lead to that as an outcome, to building understanding, to building empathy. The second funding priority is what we call narrative change. So this is building awareness about racial healing and justice work. And the idea is that these stories, that this content leads to engagement, leadership, activation of residents that are most impacted by racism, right? So the idea is that these stories, this content creates a level of action where the resident, where the person would want to do something to affect change, right? Or to get involved. The third category is education and training. So this is really, it's pretty straightforward. Like, it's designed to enhance knowledge and understanding of racial healing and justice work. So this might look like a lot of trainings focused on anti-racism, racial equity, racial justice, so on and so forth. And the last category, and this is something that we did not have 3 years ago, but we thought it was important to include this year, is what we call racial healing readiness. Think of this as capacity building support. So this is to develop the capacity in early stage ideas that may lead to new programming and projects in long-term vision to advance racial healing. So, and like I said, this is new. We're very excited about this because we know that, Healing Illinois is meant for everyone, is meant for all organizations throughout Illinois. So we want people to see themselves in the work. And I'll give you an example right now of what are some of the stuff that falls under that racial healing readiness. So racial healing sustainability, what are some examples of some projects? This might look like your organization maybe already has racial healing programming. So you might need resources and funds to expand that programming. You might want to include racial healing circles, peace circles, restorative justice practices into your work, so that you should apply for funding to incorporate that type of tools into your programming. We want to make sure that the creative arts see themselves in this work, right? And that would include community, wide murals, artistic events, exhibitions, storytelling, activities that advance racial healing. In this first, we already did a round of review of grant applications, and we had a couple of theater performances that applied, in an effort to advance racial healing. And the work is very much connected to it. So just we want organizations to be creative and again, to really see themselves in this work. So hopefully that gives you a sense of that leadership development, for racial healing practitioners, organizers, and leaders of color, in relation to racial healing, power building, and community advocacy. All of these are the types of activities that fall under racial healing sustainability. Under narrative change, some of activities that might fall under that examples might be workshops on how to support residents on how to tell their stories, how to better tell their personal stories. We want to amplify truth narratives of communities most impacted by systemic racism. Storytelling programs, that build understanding and empathy are some of the types of activities that fall under narrative change. Education and training, like I said, this was pretty self-explanatory. So again, just trainings on anti-racism, racial equity, racial justice, would fall under this. That we received a lot of education and training in this last round of review. There was a lot of DEI work that was included in that. Some were beginning we want to incorporate this for the first time. Other proposals, or this is, you know, Healing Illinois couldn't have come at a better opportunity because we want to continue this work, but don't have funding to continue it, right? So there's a lot of that. And then the last category, like I said, the racial healing readiness, it's capacity building activities that might fall under that are, community consultation, identification of issues, research, maybe an assessment or feasibility study for expanding programming or projects. So think of it, there are many times that organizations want to embark on racial equity work or racial justice work, but they might not know where to begin. So in order to do that work, you need to do the pre-work. And the pre-work might be a landscape analysis. It might be a feasibility study. It might be a series of town hall meetings with your stakeholders to determine where they're at and what are the types of programming that they need that you should provide. So some of it falls under that category. A lot of the examples I've given are external. There might be some internal as well, right? If you're doing an internal assessment of where your organization falls in that spectrum of racial equity or racial justice work, in order to embark and begin the work, you need to know where you're at, right? So it doesn't just have, it doesn't just have to be external, but it can very much be internal as well. Now, the evaluation criteria, how will your proposals be evaluated? Number one, it'll be based on alignment. Is what you're proposing a project that corresponds and aligns with the 4 funding priorities of Healing Illinois? And this is where, I did mention, and, I still wholeheartedly believe this, get creative, pitch projects that you wouldn't, we're looking for those types of projects that we wouldn't even have thought of ourselves. The only thing that I would say is also be very explicit and connect those dots for us, because we have gotten some proposals that we can just tell, like, there's no direct connection to the funding priority beyond they may have mentioned racial healing or equity a couple of times in the proposal, and that's kind of the extent of it, right? So we're really looking like, how does your project align with the funding priorities? Organization capacity, right? Does your organization have the staff, the capacity to develop and implement the project that you are proposing? Is it within scope and time frame of Healing Illinois? And we'll talk a little bit about that, about the time frame component. But this organization capacity is very important. So I'll give you an example. Well, one of the applications that I recently reviewed talked about, we're going to do internal trainings on racism for our staff. The majority of the budget covered salaries, which is fine. We're not, saying we don't want to cover expenses associated with the project. And there were a slew of other expenses like materials and whatnot. The thing with the proposal is, I did not know, they didn't name who from the staff would do the training, what capacities and expertise that those 2 staff members have to lead these trainings internally. So that's something that we need to know. If you tell me, we do have the capacity to do it, okay, give me examples of what is the capacity that you have. So that, for example, the proposal was not did not get a high score, versus another proposal that they already named, and we would like to consult with X, Y, and Z firm to do a series of 4 trainings that begin from January through April, and we will reach 50 or 60 staff. Just giving you examples. That proposal scored higher, right? Because they knew that they didn't, that they don't have the internal capacity to do it, but they want to hire and bring someone on board that does, right? So just keeping those things in mind, and that's what we mean about organizational capacity. Project scope, is the projected activities and proposed budget in alignment with the time frame? We have received some very, very ambitious requests, I should say. Some of the budget proposals are not in alignment with what they're proposing. I'll give you an example. If you're proposing that you're going to convene one town hall of 100 people to bring speakers to talk about racial healing and racial justice work, and you are proposing, you're asking for $100,000, like that's not within scope, right? And especially when we look at the budget, and sometimes in some cases we didn't even get detailed budgets. It's just like we just need 70, 75, 100, or the full 30 to execute our project, but with no detail. So hopefully, some of this, since we've already done a review of applications, hopefully this is helpful to you as you think about your work and the proposals that you're putting forth. A couple of years ago for Healing Illinois, we had intermediaries, and we're doing the same thing this year as well. Now, in front of you, you will see obviously the state of Illinois that's divided in 5 regions. This is the same regional map that the Illinois Department of Human Services uses. So we use the same, we break up the state in those 5 regions as well. Region 1 is basically all of Cook County and Chicago. There is no intermediary for Region 1. The reason being that it's Cook County, it's Chicago. There is an overabundance of nonprofits in this area. We know, I can tell you right now, we are going to get way more proposals than we will be able to fund, period, like for Healing Illinois. We know that. There was no need for an intermediary. Now, when we talk about regions 2, 3, 4, and 5, region 2 outside of Chicago is probably the one that has more organizations as well. But we did want to partner with an intermediary in region 2 to ensure that we can reach rural communities and nonprofits. And that is the same case for regions 3, 4, and 5. Now, when we begin to get to the middle of the state, to all the way to the southernmost part of the state, there are not a lot of nonprofits, and there are not a lot of nonprofits that are GATA registered. So the intermediary is meant to support that. So organizations that apply through the intermediary outside of Region 1, they do not have to be GATA registered because the intermediary is. So that is something that we wanted to ensure that we were able to fund and support organizations in the most rural parts of the state that would benefit from Healing Illinois support from these grant making dollars. So this is pretty much how we have the state divided. And you're probably curious about who the intermediaries are. Currently, for Region 2, we are partnering with the YWCA of Northwest Illinois. We may be adding another intermediary in Region 2, but we're still having those conversations. Region 3, we have partnered with United Way of Central Illinois. And then for Region 5, the intermediary is the Southern Illinois Community Foundation. We will, just to give you a sense, they are in the process of building and opening up their application portal. As soon as it's open, we will put the links on our website on healing.illinois.gov, and you will apply if you're in those regions. Now, let me be clear. If your organization is in regions 2 to 5, and the work that you're doing is in regions 2 to 5, you once the application portal for these intermediaries is open, you will apply directly to them, but we will put that information on our website. As of today, if you want to submit your application directly to Field Foundation, you can still do that. The only thing that will happen is that we'll pull your application and we will hand it off to the intermediary. You don't need to apply again because they're asking the same questions that we've already asked you. They're using the same criteria. Nothing is different whether you apply directly to Field or you apply through the intermediary. The only thing is different is that, again, organizations that apply for regions 2, 3, and 5, you do not have to be GATA registered, right? Because they have that already. They themselves are GATA registered. The only region that's currently missing is region 4. And we are in the process of identifying that intermediary. Again, if your organization is in region 4, you're doing work in that area, and since we don't have an intermediary identified yet, you can still apply directly to Field. So we'll get to more questions about that, but hopefully that was clear. Eligibility. So who is eligible to apply for Healing Illinois? You have to be a public nonprofit, organization that's based, that's, that has the 501(c)(3) designated tax code. In addition, nonprofits that are community-based that are eligible to apply for Healing Illinois are units of local government, public school districts, universities, colleges, that are in good standing with the Illinois Secretary of State. At the time of the application, your organization must be GATA registered. If you're applying directly to Field Foundation, if you're applying through to Region 1, if your organization is in Region 1, you're doing work in Region 1. Region 1 is all of Chicago and all of Cook County. Your organization has to be GATA registered. You can begin that process now. I don't take my word for it. I'm just telling you what I've heard from some organizations that are just renewing. I've heard that it's only taking a matter of a couple of weeks. So it's a fairly fast process. Organizations that are just starting from zero, basically, they're just starting from step one to get GATA registered, could take about a month or so. It could take longer. I'm just letting you know what I've heard from organizations. So if you're not GATA registered and you would like to, if you begin that process today, you very much might be able to still meet that December 1st deadline. We get a lot of questions of, well, what if my GATA registration is in process? Can I go ahead and apply? You can go ahead, but we still do the filter. When we are reviewing applications, we verify to make sure that your organization is GATA registered. If you're not, we'll put your application to the side. Now, come December 1st, if your organization has already been notified that you are indeed officially GATA registered, you can let us know as long as it's by December 1st, and we will pull your application and review it. But it's not like we are constantly checking the system. We will leave that up to you to let us know. I get a lot of questions about, is my organization GATA registered? Am I GATA approved? We don't handle that. Any questions about GATA, you'll have to go to gata.illinois.gov. We will share the website. It's in our Q&A. Our Q&A actually on the Healing Illinois website is very comprehensive. We have a website where you can check. If you don't know that, you might not be GATA registered. But if you're unsure, you can also use that website and you type in the name of your organization. And if it shows up, then that means you're GATA registered. If it doesn't, that means you are not. We use the same website, and in some instances, I also still go ahead and send the list to IDHS so that they can double verify and check that indeed these organizations are not registered. So that's a little bit about that. And the GATA component, I will also add, this is not a Field Foundation stipulation. This is because these are state dollars. So Field Foundation is administering the grant. We are the grantor. In this case, we are the ones administering, the funds. Your grant agreement will be between your organization and the Field Foundation. We are the grant recipient of the Illinois Department of Human Services, but these are state dollars. So that is why there's that GATA component to it. Grant terms. So grant funds, and here's the tricky thing, right? We know that timeline is tight. In a perfect world, we would have announced this and shared all of this, back in July or back in August at the latest, right? And you would have had more time to think about your projects. We would have given you more runway to plan, implement, and think about the sequence of how you're going to expend and use the funds. The funds have to be expended by June 30th of 2024. That is why we set the cap at 30,000, because we felt, from experience from 3 years ago, we felt that was the sweet spot in terms of, we know organizations are not going to have trouble spending 30,000 by June 30th. A couple of years ago, organizations had trouble spending amounts that were above that. They had a hard time getting that money out the door, or implementing their projects, I should say. So that's why the cap for 30,000. Organizations that are awarded the Healing Illinois grant can charge against the grant beginning November 1st. So your grant agreement will be November 1st through June 30th of 2024. Of course, as long as you can charge against the grant, as long as the expenses are directly connected to the program that you propose and that you have now been awarded a grant to implement. Here's the last one. This last bullet point, we will consider larger grants for collaborative projects that's a network or a coalition of organizations. But here's what I'll say. We didn't put parameters on it because, organizations know best what they need. But the parameters are that you have to spend the dollars by June 30th. The parameter is that organizations that are applying as a collaborative, as a coalition, what the project that they're applying for in nature has to be collaborative. We have received a slew of six-figure requests, and the proposals are pretty much on our end, our organization simply applying together. Each one gets their funding, and then they go off and do what they're going to do. Those are not the types of projects we're looking for. This was really meant to, there's 4 or 5 organizations that are doing work in X community. They're reaching in some cases, the same audiences, but they wanted to come together, create something collectively to advance racial healing, to advance equity in the communities that they serve collectively, right? That's an example. Like, that's what we're looking for. So I just wanted to add that note, that we didn't add parameters, on purpose. In hindsight, we maybe should have, because the requests, just like I said, have been huge. And some requests is like that's half of the funding allocation for the region, as an example. And we want to fund as many organizations as possible. That is the goal here, is to, one, we do want to get responsibly the money out the door, but we also want to fund as many organizations as possible. It is 9:28, so I'm going to speed through this a little bit more. So the application process. So if you haven't, if you are going to apply through the Field Foundation, you can just, our grants management system is called Fondant Technologies. That's the platform, that grant portal that we use. If you go to the Field Foundation website, you can look at how to apply, and there's a drop-down menu, and it says application portal. You click on that and it takes you to that grant interface. If you are currently a Field Foundation grantee, you do not need to create an account. You just log in and you will see the funding opportunity in the portal. If you're not a Field Foundation grantee, you'll have to create an account. And basically, once you're in that grant interface, there's a button that says create new account, and it's pretty straightforward. The system, I will say this, the Field Foundation system is not very complex. It's not very complicated, I should say. So it's pretty straightforward. You will follow the prompts, and you'll then create an account, and then you'll see the funding opportunity there. We will have an external review committee to review grant proposals for this first round. We've reviewed internally the proposals because there weren't a lot. But come November, and definitely by December 1st, we will have a volunteer review committee, because we know that we're going to have a lot of grant applications to review. So the application summary, the application itself is not very long. I will add that. How long it takes, it just depends on how seasoned of a grant writer you are. Do you have that information readily available to you? There are character limits. We put character limits to ensure applicants were succinct and were very, thoughtful about, what they're proposing. Some of the questions, like, what are you proposing? Who are you going to engage? When are you going to engage them? Why do you think this project is needed and important in the area that you're proposing to serve? So they're, like I said, very, like direct and clear and basic questions. Some of the additional questions that we ask, it's just basic information about your organization, the mission, year it was founded, your EIN, primary contact, the name of your ED, contact info, all that stuff. We do ask for some organizational diversity questions, staff composition, demographics. Just know that this is not punitive. We are not, we are not asking you this because um, we've gotten some questions of like, our organization is not very diverse, our board is not very diverse. It's something that we know we need to work on. Should I still apply, or will I get, points deducted from, the application? And the answer is no. We want to be able to, like I mentioned earlier, Field Foundation is a grant recipient of the Healing Illinois $5 million award. We also need to report to the Illinois Department of Human Services, who did we fund? And, this is a data set that we want to be able to provide to them, the types of organizations, the diversity, the kind of the profile of these organizations. We want to be able to share that with the organizations, with IDHS, sorry. Just a little bit about the application summary, right? Basically what you see in front of you is the questions in the application portal. Project name, project summary, what are you proposing? Who are you going to engage? What funding priority will you focus on? Select which region of the area you will primarily serve. So if you're applying for region 1, if you know your project is going to kind of engage multiple regions, I believe our system does not allow you to select multiple regions. Select the primary one, and then in your project narrative, just talk about, that your project is engaging all these different regions. What would be helpful to us is that in your budget, you kind of divide how funds will be used per region. The reason I say that is because we have funding allocation per region. That's how we ensure that we are equitably distributing funds throughout the state. So if you are a organization, like I said, that is implementing a project that's going to target multiple regions, we want to be able to draw down from each region rather than drawing down all the amount from one region. So as detailed as you can be, that would be great. And I know, you're probably thinking, well, y'all set character limits that might limit us from giving you detail. The character limits are still pretty high. So you do still have that space to provide as much detail as possible in that regard, right? Being very direct, but giving us just a full scope of the projects. Again, is your project collaborative? If it's no, just simply click no. List applications, just put NA, not applicable. If it is a collaborative project, then put yes, and then list out the organizations. I've had a lot of applications that list no, but they're still collaborating with organizations, so they list them out. Feel free to do that. What is your total project budget? The grant amount that you're requesting, geographic areas that will be served by this project. So are there specific counties? So then that's, I think, what that geographic area. No, sorry. So that's where you get a little bit more explicit, is that in that area, estimated number of participants, like how many people do you intend on reaching, estimated number of activities. So if you are going to facilitate a series of 4 internal trainings, then your activities are 4. If you are facilitating external conversations and it's going to be 10 over the course of 6 months, then it's 10, right? If you're hosting a town hall and it's just one town hall, then it's 1. So that's what we mean by number of activities. The target population, it's like, who are you targeting? Is it the Latinx community? Is it the African American community? So here's where you can get a little bit detailed about like who. And then, there's the section about tell us about your project idea, like literally who, what, when, where, and why. How do you know your organization is ready for this work and has the capacity to do it? What problem, issue, community need are you addressing? Describe associated short-term outcomes of your project. Feel free to select from the project outcomes that we have. We listed out, like, here are the project outcomes. Feel free to select the ones that make sense for you. We are not looking for 10 outcomes. If all you have is one outcome, that is okay. And that honestly would make a lot of sense because these are short-term projects. These are not a year or 2 or 3 year projects. So just know that we're not looking for quantity, but for quality here. How will you measure impact? So basically, how are you going to track this? Are you going to provide surveys? Are there surveys? Is it focus groups, applications? Like just give us a sense of how you're gonna track, how are you gonna measure that you were successful in meeting these outcomes? Now key dates. So here are some important dates, right? As we've been saying, applications are due December 1st. We have these deadline reviews, or review deadlines, I should say, that were meant more so for internal purposes so that we were not reviewing 400 applications on December 1st. So as people submit them, we review them. Review deadlines, the next review deadline coming up is November 10th, with the ultimate deadline of it being December 1st. We have upcoming info session is on the 20th. So if you want to share this with your networks, you want to share this information, please do so. One of the things that we were not able to announce at the last info session, but we can today, is that we are providing some technical support to grant applicants for Healing Illinois on November 8th and 9th. Now, these are virtual, they're not in person. It is limited to 50 people, so spots are limited. Please sign up, keeping the following in mind. It's only one person per organization. Please only register if you know you're going to attend because spots are limited. We probably might be adding one additional virtual session. The TA sessions are really meant, so you do have to come into that TA session with a project in mind. Our partners for the technical assistance session is Shy by Design. They're a local Chicago firm. They will help you through a series of prompts, through a series of activities, will help you develop your project, enhance it, and even think about, how do you ensure that the project that you're proposing that you're going to implement is anti-racist in nature. So that is what the TA is meant to do. It is not required, but we really did want to provide some additional supports to organizations because, as we've been saying from the beginning, we want all organizations to see themselves in this work. We know that some organizations, by nature of the work that they do, are way more advanced in this spectrum of racial healing and equity work than others. But as many organizations as we can get to think about, how they embed equity and justice into their work, we want to do that. So we probably, Jessica and Alexia, if they haven't already, will put the links on the chat. We will also be adding them to the website, so healing.illinois.gov, so you will be able to register through there too. So yeah, we're excited that we were able to share that with you today. We're gonna open it up now for Q&A. Let's see. I'm gonna open up the Q&A here. The first question is, do applicants need to propose activities that address all of the funding priorities, or can we focus on one or two? That's a great question. David. Yes, no, you do not have to propose a project that tackles all of the funding priorities. I would encourage you to choose one. We did had some proposals that was a very comprehensive proposal that proposed something for each funding priority, and the project was just way out of scope. And remember, the other thing that we're evaluating your projects on is that June 30th, 2024. So we also wanted to be realistic because we know that if you are proposing activities that would take any one human person to implement over the course of a year in 6 months, I mean, it's just not realistic, right? So yes, I would encourage you to focus on one funding priority. If it has to be two, because really it just makes sense and I really want to do this, then go ahead and do it. But I would really encourage you to kind of pick a lane. Hopefully that answers your question. The next question is, how do we get invitation code to apply through Field Foundation? There's no invitation code. So if you go to the website, you can go to either Field Foundation's website, you click on, there is a how to apply tab, and then in there it says application portal. If you're a current, like I said, if you're a current Field Foundation grant recipient, then you don't need to create an account. Just log into your account and you'll see the Healing Illinois funding priority. If you're not a Field Foundation grant recipient, then you just have to create an account. Once you create the account, you will see the funding priority. This is not, Healing Illinois is not an invite only. It is open to, everybody and anybody as long as you meet the criteria. You're a nonprofit, you're a 501c3, you are GATA registered. If you're in Region 1, if you're in the other regions that we talked about, because there's intermediaries in those regions, you do not have to be GATA registered. You can just apply directly through the intermediary. So hopefully that answers your question. Does your organization have to be a nonprofit? It does. So yes, you have to be a 501c3. Additionally, we will accept applications from local units of government, schools, universities, churches. So we will receive review applications from those types of entities. And you might be curious why. Well, because the state funds those types of entities. So because these are state dollars, we're following very, very tight and similar guidelines as the state. But for the most part, yes, you do need to be, you do need to be a 501c3. There's a question, is there an intermediary for Region 4? Not yet. There will be. We're scheduling that meeting this week. So hopefully in the next, week or so, we will have that information, up and ready to go. So we're working on it. So just stay put. The other thing that I'll say, the majority that I didn't talk about earlier, when I mentioned the intermediaries, they're very much on the same timeline as the Field Foundation is. The majority of their applications are also still due the first. That's why, like I said, I wouldn't stress out about if you have a project and you want to apply, go ahead and apply directly to Field Foundation. Even if you don't have your GATA, if you're not GATA registered, but you're in regions 2 through 5, we will just hold your application and give it to the intermediary. So just know that. I wouldn't stress out too much about that. If you're ready to apply, go ahead and apply directly to us. Like I said, we'll just hand your application packet to them. So it's not like you have to reapply again. Hopefully that answers your question. Another question, what if the applicant is statewide organization and proposing a statewide project? That is, we've gotten some of those. I would just say be realistic, because if you have a staff of 2 and you're telling me that you're going to do a statewide project, I mean, that's just not realistic, right? So just be very, very specific on how statewide. Are you working with, because you're doing statewide, I'm thinking you have a staff of 100, or you have really like tight, close relationships with organizations in these other areas where you're doing, statewide work. So I would say, I'm not saying no, you can propose it, but here are the things that I will say: be realistic, be very specific of the people power that you'll have to ensure that this is indeed statewide. And then how are you using those dollars statewide, like I said, because of how we have the funding allocated per region. If you decide to put forth a statewide project, just help us in the budget understand how funding will be used in each of those regions. So just help us with that, because what I don't think is fair is that we draw down all the money from one region when we could draw down from different regions because you are proposing a statewide project. So that's the only thing that I will say with that. Hopefully that's helpful. Will the timeline be the same for submission and notification of awards if you're in regions 2 to 5? It'll be about the same. If they're off by timeline, it's like by a couple of weeks. So the majority of the intermediaries are also trying to get money out the door by the end of the year. Worst case scenario, you're getting your money at the top of the year, like January of 2024, but you will know by December whether you have been awarded the grant or not. And that's the same thing with Field. We are doing our best to get the money out the door by December, mid-December, so definitely before everyone breaks for the holiday. So we're doing the best that we can. So we're going to work hard to do that. What is direct contact information for regions 2? They don't have that yet, so I don't want to give you any questions that you still have about Healing Illinois. You can direct to Healing Illinois at fieldfoundation.org, and I will filter those questions to the intermediaries. For example, YWCA, they just came on board as an intermediary on Friday. So literally, like, we're all working on, as fast as we can to get all of this lined up. We're hosting actually, if you go to the website to healing.illinois.gov, we are hosting we're hosting regional kickoff events. Our first regional kickoff event is on Friday. It is in person, is for Region 5. So it's in Marion, Illinois. So it's in southern Illinois. For Region 2, for that northwest part of the state, we are hosting a kickoff event on November 14th. We will be adding the registration link on the website. We're finding a space. We're currently looking for space right now, so that's why we haven't put the information up, but we will. It'll be up this week. So if you want to attend that regional kickoff event that's specific to Region 2, you're welcome to. We will, but like I said, we'll be putting up that information quite soon. And then on December 5th, we're hosting a regional kickoff event for Region 3. It's for Central Illinois. So you're Region 3 or 4, I forget, but we'll have that information on the website too. It'll be for Region 3. It's Region 3. Okay, the other question, the website listed healing.illinois.org. Is there missing? Want to make sure it's correct. Sorry, it's .gov. So the website for Healing Illinois, it's healing.illinois.gov. And then the email for Healing Illinois is healingillinois@fieldfoundation.org. Did I have .org there? No, here, this is the correct website, healing.illinois.gov. And then there's the email where you can reach out to us. Next question, United Way of Central Illinois, is this Springfield and that is Region 4? I think that is misstated on the slide. Got it. Okay. So we will work on that. Thank you for that. There's a question, do we need to be registered with the Illinois Secretary of State and in good standing at the time of application, or can we be in process at the time of application? That is a good question. And yes, you do need to be in good standing with the Secretary of State. In terms of if it can be in process at the time of application, I just don't know how long it takes. I don't know. It would be hard. I don't know if you begin the process now or if your application is already in process, will it be approved and ready to go by the 1st? Like, I just don't know. So it's hard for me to answer that question because I don't know how long that process takes. There's a question, another question, how can you be considered intermediary? We are not looking for intermediaries at this point. We are only looking for the application is only for to be a grantee or sub-grant recipient of Healing Illinois. We did not, to be completely honest and transparent, we did not have like a competitive process for intermediaries this year because the timeline was very tight. Had we had a different timeline and runway, then we would have had a competitive process for intermediaries. That's something that we will consider for the next round, if there is a next round of Healing Illinois dollars. But I can tell you of how we identified the intermediaries. The intermediaries, one, they needed to have grant making experience. So by nature, they know, just how to administer large scale grants. Ideally, the majority of them have received state funding, so they know what it entails to, do everything correctly, document everything, track everything, because we know we need to report back to the state. They have the staff capacity to one, take in the dollars and disperse the dollars. And the most important is that they're also GATA registered. And we are looking at this from, this is the nature of what they do, right? They also grant out dollars. So community foundations like the Southern Illinois Community Foundation, YWCA, who works a lot and distributes of funding as well, from the state, and United Way. So ideally, it's like these are organizations that by nature they are intermediaries themselves. The majority of them were partners of ours 3 years ago. YWCA is a new partner this time around, and like I said, we're looking to add an additional intermediary in Region 2. It's a partner from 3 years ago. The other question, do recipients 501(c)(3)s need to be based in Illinois? Can an inter-org that hopes to concentrate their scope of work in Illinois apply? That is a good question. I will send you the language that the state has on this. So you can be an interstate org. So I think of like East St. Louis is like a region or area that comes to mind as an example. There are many organizations that are on the Missouri side that do serve and work with organizations that are in the East St. Louis part that are in Illinois. The thing is, the way that the state reads, the way that it reads on the state side is, you can apply, but you have to have like a location or office in Illinois within X amount of time. It's either before you get the award or after you get the award, something that I will find the correct language so that I don't give you the wrong information. So it's like, we're not saying no, but it depends. And we would just follow state guidelines on that. So we can put that website. That's a really good question. So we'll put that on the Q&A and just add the guidelines that the state has for that. The next question, I'm a faculty member with university. Was it stated that there can only be one project from one organization? How many applications can be submitted by one organization? What if I'd like to apply and another faculty member has another proposal that they want to apply? You can submit multiple applications as long as they're different, in the projects are distinctly different in nature. What we don't want to see is the same project for the same organization, just for, in this case, a university, for different departments, but it's the same project. Does that make sense? So hopefully the answer is helpful. So yes, you can submit multiple times as long as they're distinct projects. Can we get access to these slides after? Yes, we will share them with you, and then we'll put them on the website as well. Will there be any opportunities for sustainability and funding and programming after June 30th? That is a good question, and we don't know. I wish that I could, in a perfect world, this, we would have received a multi-year grant so that we could have provided you with multi-year funding as well, so that you could have you could be thinking about your projects in phases, right? So that you can think about, what does it look like in year 1? What does it look like in year 2 and year 3, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, that's not the situation we find ourselves in. These are state dollars, so everything's just dependent on the state budget. We're hopeful that everything will go well and it'll run smoothly, and we'll knock it out of the park, and the state will be excited and continue to be excited about the initiative, and y'all will implement amazing projects throughout the state, that they just must and have to do this again. So the only thing that I will say is, if we do get renewed for another year of Healing Illinois, we should know early on. I'm thinking like maybe by May or June. Definitely by the time we get to June, I would hope that we know whether we're going to do this again, and then we can inform all of you early on. So I'm not, to be determined, I guess is my answer. Next question. If partnerships are planned, do we need to include letters from partners stating that they are going to be part of the project? I didn't see a spot application to upload partner letters, just spot to list them. I will list them. If you have an MOU, you can attach it. I believe you can attach files. If you can't, then just go ahead. Like I said, you can list them out. Can we get this PowerPoint? Yes, you'll get the PowerPoint. We'll put it on the website. Our request will be for training education through consultant services, may include IDC. And if so, at what percent? Indirect cost, 10%. You can include up to 10% of indirect costs. Will you please walk through your budget template? The budget is Lori, our template is very straightforward. So it's there's not a lot there. I would just say break it down from here's what it's going to cost to uh do the project, here's what, supplies, materials, space rental, if you're doing a direct cost, do your 10% or up to 10%. Are you going to charge salaries? What percentage? So just detail it out. Like I said, it's not super comprehensive and complicated. The template is pretty straightforward. The only thing is, like I said, we got some requests that were like we're asking for 30, and then the budget template only lists 30. That doesn't tell me how you're gonna use the funds beyond this is the project we're proposing and we need 30,000. Okay, how are you gonna use the 30,000? So it's pretty straightforward, I promise. It is not scary or complicated as some of the funder budget templates tend to look. Jennifer, for clarity, we're in region 2. If we submit before November 10th to Field Foundation, we will still be notified by the 20th. You'll be notified, but here's one of the things that we are seeing. You'll be notified if you've moved to the next phase of the grant making process. Ultimately, everybody will be notified by December, whether you've been awarded the grant. Some organizations are being notified off the bat because the project is just solid. They scored really high. There are other ones that were kind of like in that in between. They're strong, so we didn't want to say no, but it's also not a yes yet. So we're just moving you to the next phase of the approval process. For those that are in that you're applying outside of Region 1, um, we are scoring them and we are giving them to the intermediary, but we ultimately want them to have a say in the matter as well. So we are handing those off to them, and we will work with them to figure out that you are notified in a timely manner. So you'll still be notified one way or another, but we are, because now we do have the intermediaries in place, we want them to have a say in the matter as well. But we are giving our recommendation. It's like, yes, you should fund them. Here's why we think the project is solid. Here's how much we scored them on the rubric. And hopefully they agree as well, or they might have a different take on it. Can organizations include multiple funding priorities within their application? You can include multiple funding priorities. The only thing is that if at all possible, as I mentioned earlier, just choose a lane, because we did receive some comprehensive proposals, and they're just way beyond, they're just out of scope in budget, and they're just out of scope in the timeline. Many of us, I've been in the philanthropic sector for years. I'm also a programmer myself. Many of us that are reviewing these are by nature developed programs. So we also have a sense of what it takes, that entails to implement and launch these programs. So that's why just be very specific. If you do multiple funding priorities, be very specific of how you're going to implement. Do you have the people power to do that? Just be explicit about that. If the grant period is the November 1st through the 30th, but we are applying the deadline, can the grant cover expenses for the project dated 11/1st if the project's already underway? You can, yes, if the project, yeah. So that's why even though the deadline is December 1st, we still wanted to have, for organizations who are applying for a project that's to expand, or they maybe already had a project in mind and they were implementing their project even before Healing Illinois was announced. The stars kind of just aligned for those types of organizations where now there's this funding opportunity, and we can charge expenses for a project against that grant. Of course, the only thing that I will say, as long as it's within scope, as long as the expenses you're charging against the grant make sense, we don't just want organizations charging everything and anything against the grant, starting November 1st. So it has to be aligned and within scope. Would actual racial justice equity work be eligible? Um, yes, but it depends on what that type of work is. Sheila, is it trainings? Is it, what is the work? So it can be, it just depends on what the work is. The next question, using consultant services, will we need to be present at it? Will we need to present an actual schedule of workshops, etc., or can those details wait until the award? Those details can wait until the award. If we get a sense of like at least just like it's 4 workshops, we don't need a timeline or just like it's going to happen on this date or that date. Some organizations are providing that, but it's just because they have it. To your point, if you don't have it, yeah, but at least it's going to be 4 workshops or 6. Just let us know what that is. Maybe just an idea. We're thinking the workshops will take place from February through March, just as an example. If you have that information, just, we let us know. I think I answered that question. The next one is using consult services. Will the activities basically be their training? It can be, I believe so. That if you're providing workshops, then the activities are the workshops. And then it's how many activities, how many workshops. Is it possible to obtain the list of organizations interested in this grant support the development of collaborative projects? Yeah, we don't know because we don't have that list. We will have a list, obviously we'll list out the organizations once we make the awards, but we don't have like a comprehensive list on our website of organizations that are interested in this type of work. We just leave that up to you to reach out to your network, talk to your friends, share this with your colleagues, and see if there are other organizations in your network that are just interested in collaborating. But you don't, just so you know, also you don't have to, like, the collaborative piece is not mandatory. It's only if it makes sense. We don't want organizations forcing collaboration where there isn't any, right? Next question, if it is collaborative project between organizations located in regions 1 and 2, do we still need to work with the intermediary in region 2? Um, that is a good question. That is a good question, and I would say no. So I would say if it's a collaborative project, there's still a lead, right? So is the lead in region 1 or region 2? If it's in region 1, then you apply directly to us. If it's in region 2, then if the lead of this collaborative project is in region 2, then you do go through the intermediary. So it just depends on who's the applicant, who is the lead organization. That will determine whether it's region 2 or whether you apply to region 1 or region 2. Are you still allowing for fiscal agents for this round? Yeah, if you have a fiscal agent, you can apply. So that is the other note. If your organization is in region 1 and you are not GATA registered, but there's an organization in your network that is, they can apply on your behalf. You just need to obviously talk to them, and the organization can apply on your behalf, and they can still apply for their own projects. So that doesn't, like I said, organizations can submit for multiple projects as long as they're distinct in nature. And in scenarios like that, we allow for that. I am organization A and I'm applying for my own project, but I am also applying. I'm going to submit another application on behalf of this other organization who is not GATA registered. Where we allow for that, yes. And then the fiscal agent part, yes, you can apply through a fiscal agent. Do you need letters of support to demonstrate collaboration? You don't need them. If you have them, we'll take them, but we don't ask for them. You just list out the organizations that you are collaborating with. This is kind of like an honor system. We're gonna hope that you are telling us the truth, and you're not just listing out organizations for the sake of it. So we're working off of trust and hoping that you're telling us the truth. Is your budget template in your budget template? I see the message in the South, the foundation of your applying in the general operating category. This number should match the expenses. Da, 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 da. I do not find the organizational financial history in the application. What does this mean? Lori, if you can just email me because I'm not sure. I will have to think about this one a little bit more. So if you just email me at healingillinois@fieldfoundation.org, we can figure that out. The next question, if target outcome is racial healing, sustainability, must it be a current program expansion? Can it be a new program with an org that does not work within Rome, but not identified directly as such? For racial healing sustainability, it does not have to be an existing program. It could be a new program. We just, through the expansion part in that, because we did want organizations to know that they could apply for Healing Illinois dollars if, they had existing programming, but it does not just have to be current or expansion. It could be a new program. How do we sign up for the TA session? If there should be a link on the chat. Team, if you can add the link to the TA sessions, that would be great. If not, it'll be on the website. Let's see, it is 10:05. And we still have a handful of questions to go through. Hold on. There's a question about estimated number of awards related to estimated number of proposals. It is hard to say so far. Everything's been, all the requests we've gotten, it has been at the top of 30,000. I am hopeful that we'll get some smaller asks, but it's hard to tell right now. Can you speak more about parameters around project initiatives that are internally focused? A lot of the projects that are internally focused probably have to do with trainings. Like you want to train your staff or board on a specific skill set or topic. So that really is that's how I imagine the majority of internal work will be. You're enhancing learning, you're enhancing knowledge. Or you're doing, like I said earlier, under that capacity funding priority, you're doing like a feasibility study internally to figure out where your organization is in the spectrum of racial healing and equity. When will awards be announced? Officially in December, mid-December or earlier. Is the funding reimbursable? Can new organizations get an advance payment if possible? You are getting the funding up front. So if you are awarded a Healing Illinois grant, you are getting the full grant amount up front. You're not drawing down from the fund, at least from Region 1. Intermediaries might do it a little bit different. Can the proposed projects be a request for seed funding for a new initiative? That is, if we propose new program that will extend past June 30th, do we have to demonstrate its financial sustainability after the 30K initial investment? No, it can be seed funding for a new initiative, yes, but it has to be connected to the funding priorities. Like that's the only thing that I will continue to hammer down. It has to be connected to the funding priorities, and you have by June 30th demonstrate, how you've used the funds through the 30th. What we don't want to see happen, it's a new initiative and you're launching on June 15th, right? That's not what we want to see happen. I am an educational consultant with business that focuses on limited belief systems that impact most vulnerable populations in education. I am in Region 5. Will be notifying us the link to apply through Southern Illinois Community is open. Yes, and we'll have that information on the website. And then, like I said, they're holding a regional kickoff event on Monday. So if you're available to attend and join us in person, like that would be great. There's questions about indirect costs. Indirect cost, like I said, you can charge up to 10%. It's 10:09, so if for whatever reason I don't get through your questions, please email me at healingillinois@fieldfoundation.org, and I promise to respond. So I want to make sure I get through most of them. Does the intermediary receive any of the grantees grant money? There will be a indirect cost. Yes, that the intermediaries will take also for overhead costs, but it's not from your money per se. So if you're awarded 30,000, you get the full 30,000. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Will there be reporting required for this grant? Yes, it'll be a final report, and we will be we're developing that final report now. We'll send that out to you way in advance so you have it. There will be other if you become a Healing Illinois grant recipient, there will be other activities where we will be connecting with you throughout the grant process just to check in, and we'll have a couple of other convenings and gatherings of other grant grant recipients to see how you're doing and check in on your projects collectively. There's a question about target dollars and expended per region. Will Chicago be allocated the larger percentage of the total funds available? Yes, the funding allocations were done by population percentage, poverty rates, and unemployment rates. Chicago, no surprise, has the biggest funding. Region 1, I should say, no surprise, has the biggest funding allocation, followed by Region 2. And then everything else is just distributed through those filters that I just mentioned. And it was done in collaboration with IDHS. So Field did not set the funding allocations ourselves. We did in collaborations with IDHS. How are we notified if we're awarded or not? So if you applied, let's say for example, you applied on the for the October deadline, we notified organizations this week whether they won. If you were awarded, yes. If you're not, we notify them, or if you're moving to the next phase of the process. There's questions about how disbursements being handled. So organizations that are awarded the grant, you'll receive a grant agreement sometime in December, and then we'll disperse the money up front. Southern Illinois kickoff is Monday, November 6th. Yes, November 6th at 5. Doors open at 5. Everything starts at 5:30-ish. Okay, some of these questions have been answered. Yeah, this is a really good question, Stephanie. I don't know if you're still on the call, but yes, it's my organization. It's a health system with a site primarily in Cook County. We also have sites in Lake County. If we create a system-wide program, for instance, do we still need to break down our budget between Region 1 and 2 if 100% of the cost will be incurred by Racial Equity Office based in Cook County? In that case, yeah, if the costs are incurred by Cook County, then yeah, everything's just gonna get pulled out of Region 1 if you're awarded the grant. Can we get a list of attendees? I don't see why not, but you would just get names. I don't think we can't release emails without everyone's permission, and we didn't ask that up front. So sorry. So I don't know. I'm gonna say no, but there's still 100 people, so you can probably click on the tab of participants and see who's on the call. What is the limited direct cost? It's 10%. Will the questions in our Q&A be addressed at the info session? If not, will they be addressed? The questions that were asked at this info session, if they're not already on the website, we'll be adding them. So we keep that Q&A up to date. So we will update it this week. Can we ask for more than 30% if we're gearing up for more than one activity? You're welcome to ask for more than 30, but really, I would try and stay as close to 30 as you can, because I will tell you right now, is a very competitive pool, very, very competitive pool. And it's only going to get even more competitive with as we get more applications. So I would stick to the 30, to be honest. And the intermediaries have the same cap. 30, some have a cap of 15. You can use, there's a question, can we use an alternative budget template, or must we use the one provided? You can use your own. You don't have to use that one. You can use your own, just as long as it does detail and tell us, like, all the information that we're looking for. Oh, it's 10:14 and I didn't get through all of them, but I promise that your question, I got through almost all of them. There's probably 4 or 5 that are still not answered, but I promise that I will be responding to these via the website. So look at the Q&A. There's a question about the rubric. Can we share the rubric? Yeah, we can put it out. We can put it on the website. We can share a little bit more information about just how we're scoring the applications. There's the last question that I still want to answer. Is it possible that you apply for 30 and may receive a grant award less than you ask? Yes. I will tell you the majority of grant proposals that we are pushing through are not at 30. They're at less than that. Not too off, but they're off, yes. I'm still confused about the due dates. You mentioned that charges against the grant can be made for November expenses. What is the due date for the application? The application deadline is December 1st. If you walk away with anything, no, if you walk away knowing anything today, is that the Healing Illinois application deadline is December 1st. I think I got through most of the questions. Thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate you joining us today. Hopefully you walk away more informed, hopefully less confused. If you are confused, please email me at healingillinois@fieldfoundation.org. If I didn't get to answer all your questions or your question on the chat, I promise I will be responding, and we'll add the question with an answer on the Healing Illinois website, which is healing.illinois.gov.